Hi everyone. So in the last period of time I've been talking a lot about what I call flat earth reality and even flat earth medicine. What do I really mean by that? So flat earth is reducing the world to what you can see with your senses and what can be measured. So we tend to leave everything out that is subjective, that can't be seen, can't be touched, what people call the objective world as opposed to the subjective world. And then we reduce the world to this field, and that's we regard as reality. And a large reason for this is the way science, conventional science functions, because conventional science only takes what's real, what can be measured, what can be touched, what can be weighed, and that becomes what is regarded as reality. So they do the same thing with the human being, reducing the human being to that which can be measured. And that which can be measured that becomes the target of medicine, so everything else is left out. The human being becomes much more like a machine. And the model of the machine is a perfect model for conventional science. So they made the machine model a kind of, that's what reality is all about. Everything is made of parts, and the parts can be stuck together to recreate the machine. And you can take parts out and put new parts in. So the conventional model has kind of reduced the human being to a machine-like item which can be manipulated, can be taken apart and measured. The parts can be measured, and then you can construct an idea of what a human being is like. But what's left out? Well, everything is left out. Because the trouble is, I sometimes ask my students, which is more real, the objective world or the subjective world? Well, the truth is that the subjective world is much more real, because that's the reality of our experience. What looks real out there, or everything that passes through our senses and is interpreted in the brain. So the tree is not really out there, it's inside. So our reality is all subjective, and it can't be anything else. So the trouble with scientists, and what scientists do, is that they take the human being, break it up into parts, and then develop a whole philosophy around physiology and anatomy as if that's what a human being is. And of course, human beings not that. First of all, even science knows that behind matter is energy, behind energy is information. But the conventional medical model, which is driven by, you could say, pharmaceutical companies which are invested in the biochemical narrative, leaves all that out. So they don't pay attention to energy information because it's difficult to measure and it's messy. So the whole concept of energy information is left out. So a lot of the stuff which is immeasurable is left out. And the whole subjective components of our emotions and our thinking and our willpower and our joys and our awesome feelings are all abandoned in a way. Medicine sticks to a very narrow field. And that's what I mean by flat earth medicine. So where only that which is measurable is included in medicine, and that which is not measurable but which makes up 80% of the human being, the subjective components, is just dismissed as not that important, because we've got to stick to what we can weigh and measure. Now, I'm a student of traditional Chinese medicine, and that's been around for thousands of years. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of textbooks on acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, and it's still used today in hospitals. When I was in China, I visited a 7-story high hospital for traditional medicine. Something like 10 or 15% of the doctors allowed to be conventional to do the surgery, but all the rest are Chinese traditional doctors. And downstairs in the basement, there are all these herbalists with Bunsen burners and cooking up the herbs and sending the herbs up to the wards. And every patient has a bottle of herbal medicine. It obviously still works. And yet it's thousands of years old. And there was no science to it. They didn't have the science that we have today. So how did they do it if without science? Of course, there is what I call the science of experience. And that science of experience is what all of us use today, even to run our lives. I had a conversation once with a scientist, and he said to me, Bernard, what you've just said has got nothing to do with science. I said, Hans, if your relationship with your wife depended on science, you wouldn't be able to have one. You don't walk around with a textbook to deal with your partner. That comes from experience, and experience is incredibly valuable. And even the scientists, the very conventional scientists who are doing all their scientific studies, they know very well that they use intuition and inspiration and imagination to do their science. And that's all subjective stuff, but they don't say that in their classical scientific articles, because they're not allowed to say that, oh, I had an inspiration and that's how my science worked, or I had some kind of insight. And so they don't talk about that part of it when they write the article. They talk about it as if they have a machine. They only talk about that which is objective and measurable. So the trouble is that the conventional model has reduced the idea of reality to what I call flat earth. And the flat earth medicine has done the same thing, reduced human beings to machines which can be taken apart and measured. And that's a kind of reductionistic approach. It's not the way we actually work. I mean, all of us in our lives, we use, it's not that we don't like what science has done. There are lots of very useful things in the reductionistic model. But, if a doctor treats you like a machine, you get pretty upset. If he doesn't listen to you and he doesn't participate in your story and have sensitivity to your feeling, that's not good medicine. And the trouble is that the way medicine is structured today is not to give the doctor enough time even to look at the subjective aspects. He's got to stick to the most reductionistic parts of the problem so that he can just deal with it in a quick way, giving you either surgery or drugs. So the whole complex being, which is not a reductionistic machine, but a living, exciting, magical system, tends to be left out. And human beings are unique and special, and we need to honor that so that we start to have a much more comprehensive and holistic look at who we are. And we actually function that way. So we constantly are using our feeling and our thinking and our imagination and in ways that we use in our actual practice. So we don't follow just a reductionistic way unless we think in that kind of material scientific way, and some people do. They leave out their feelings. They think that only thinking is the way to deal with the world, but even thinking is subjective. So they just need to add the feeling part of it also into the narrative. So we need to shift our dynamics from flat earth to holistic, to see the whole picture, to see depth, because the flat earth has no depth to it. We need to bring the vertical, which has depth to it. And then the depth and the horizontal can work together in a creative way. Have a good day.